Well, welcome to Ecom Insiders Podcast. My name is Debbie, and this event is sponsored by SPC Tech. Today's topic is the Mexican e-commerce market, how to expand and what challenges sellers will face. Our guest today is Ramiro Velasquez, and he is from the company GoAvance. Ramiro is an engineer, entrepreneur, e-commerce veteran, and most importantly, co-founder of GoAvance, the company focused on bringing the world's brands to Latin America. So let's get started. Welcome, Romero.
Thank you. Thank you, Debbie. So thank you so much
Yes,
for having me.
I'm so happy to have you, and we have so much to talk about and so much to learn today. The Mexican e-commerce market is just booming. What do you think the key
Yeah.
factors are for driving this growth?
Oh my God, like I don't even know where to start. There's so much. So macroeconomically, we sort of went through the pandemic period where we saw the US have a huge boom in e-commerce, right? Well, what it also did is it also made everyone sort of assess the relationship with overseas manufacturers because obviously every single port on the West Coast was completely backed up, right? So there was a lot of looking towards Mexico and going, hey, what if we manufacture here? So although it's not just e-commerce specifically, what we saw was a strengthening of the trade relationships between both countries, right? Which has led to a bunch of nearshoring, a bunch of remote work, a bunch of things that led to the dollar getting to the peso getting stronger. Excuse me. Which allowed us to buy more external product, more imported product, and so on. On the other hand, a lot of digital solutions started coming around around the same time for payment. So things like Mercado Pago from Mercado Libre, what basically they said was, we're a cash-based economy. We've got to figure out how to let people pay at the corner shop so they can buy stuff on our website. So the economy slowly, very slowly becoming digitized because again, we are a cash-based economy. And then also the trust. It almost feels like Amazon sort of looked around in the US and went, all right, we've hit our peak. Let's actually push everywhere else. So Australia, Japan, Mexico, Brazil, they all
Mm.
started gaining strength. Here we already had Mercado Libre, like have a very strong presence beforehand, but it's sort of like this mixture of factors that is like, I got back to Mexico 7 years ago. 7 years ago, the conversation was still, and does it actually get to you? And it's moved away from
Mm.
that and has become this there's been like legitimacy to it.
Well,
Factors
that kind
around,
of gives me a lead into another good question. Compared to other Latin American countries, how Mexican e-commerce market to be a little bit unique?
I think we have just a much closer relationship to the United States, right? So we're part of the North American Remote Fulfillment Program from Amazon specifically, which means we can buy from Amazon US to Mexico, and in many cases, not always. Also, like your standard Shopify e-commerce websites, again, a lot easier to ship to Mexico than it might be to ship somewhere else, right?
Yeah.
We also have an importing threshold of $50, where anything under $50, you don't have to declare. Makes it a lot easier
Mm.
to be buying stuff from abroad and getting in. Um, there are some universalities, like I think across
Well,
the
let
board.
me ask you this.
Yeah,
What product categories do you think are experiencing the most significant growth in the Mexican e-commerce?
that's an interesting question. It really depends on where you look, in the sense that like we handle a lot of supplements. We think supplements are great, but that's because we have the know-how to get it in, and that's not that easy, right? So we're seeing the growth. I don't know if everyone else is seeing the growth. Whereas, let's say, just your general consumer goods, um, they're just we're seeing that demand consistently grow. So I honestly, I'm a big fan right now of UGC content, and anything that's TikTokable and Instagrammable
Mm.
is seeing just massive acceptance because of some dynamics that happen in country with how influential we are, how susceptible we are to influencer marketing. So it varies. It varies, but I think right now it's at a spot where anything can grow if you're marketing it correctly.
Well, you brought up something that I've been wondering about. in just beyond the marketplace, what other channels do you think are probably vital for reaching Mexican online shoppers? You mentioned TikTok. I mean, what
Yeah.
do you think are probably the most important channels right now for reaching that market?
I think being on Meta is very, very,
Uh,
very important. If we're talking paid ads, Meta is Instagram is hugely popular. Facebook is still hugely popular, which is a surprise to me. Um, Being on TikTok, not crucial, but absolutely desirable.
mm,
Google ads aren't going to do much,
okay.
and just understanding local marketplaces, so Mercado Libre, Coppel, Walmart, Liverpool, everything outside of Amazon is also hugely important. It goes from Google search results, like Google Shopping search results. You'll get more to just the traffic that you can get from people that only shop on one website.
Yeah. Now, I know that Mexico is just a really vast geographical area. So I'm wondering, how do sellers actually ensure efficient and affordable last mile delivery across the country?
There's a lot of 3PL solutions. Okay, so I'll start out by saying do not under any circumstance use Mexican Post, Correos de Mexico. It is just
Okay.
it is one surefire way to get stuff either lost or it's going to take 3 weeks to get to where it needs to get. But there's 3PL solutions that are working with DHL, with Estafeta, with FedEx. Like they're making it work, and it's we're seeing last mile delivery be considerably cheaper than the US.
Wow.
Even like this we're getting next day or 2 day delivery on platforms for $5-6, which is
Yeah, that's
fantastic.
great.
Yeah, so there's a lot of cost savings in Mexico, if you know what you're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, you come in and you get hit with a 30% tax bill, then hey, suddenly it wasn't worth it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there's definitely stuff to be done here.
So, are there any upcoming regulatory changes in Mexico that sellers should be aware of before they get into the market?
Not as far as I'm aware. There's some talks about this informal importing aspect uh, being shut down. I don't believe it.
Oh,
Um, and yeah, I mean, it's all speculation. It's all rumors. But no, I just don't. They're not, as far as I can tell. Generally, we just get hit with them uh, in a surprising sort of moment.
mm, mm,
Yeah. I mean, but while we're talking regulations, I think something that's really important to think about is, um, am I complying with existing regulations? Like, let's not be worried about the stuff that's coming up. I think most people that are trying to do it just on their own are probably not complying. So,
mm.
I think the first question is, am I doing everything by the book? And then the next question is, oh, okay, I'm doing everything by the book because I'm drop shipping from the US, I'm using remote fulfillment or whatever. The next question is am I really reaching my target audience? Because we're seeing it.
Mm,
We consistently see, hey, this product gets 2 sales a month when it's abroad. We brought it in, we put it in Prime, we made an affordable price for consumers, and now it's selling, for a day. And it's like,
yeah.
okay, cool. Like we made it work for them. So
So I'm wondering, like, are there any differences between like the regulations for selling on Amazon Mexico as opposed to Amazon USA? Do you find that there are some differences?
yes, and even some of the same stuff is stuff that we don't comply with. So in Mexico, you cannot use FBA warehouse because you cannot legally own the product without having a business entity in Mexico, some
Ah,
sort of tax ID that it can be attributed to. So right off the bat, we get a lot of like, hey, I tried to sell and I just couldn't get the shipping going. Yeah, uh, because you're not set up the right way. There are some generic uh, tax IDs, and what you end up doing there is getting hit with a 28% tax because you can't deduct anything. So
mm,
it's not worth it, right? So existing regulations like that are already barriers to entry. Other than that, like there's a little bit more, let's call it, there's a little bit more barriers to entry for everything that's like supplements, everything that's like
mm,
baby products, everything that's topicals. in the US, like you get the FDA approval and that's good.
Yeah.
Here you need it to be approved, and also you need the person selling it to have the permission to handle this product. Like, so
Okay.
it's like a there's extra protections because you're not only limiting the product, but you're limiting the seller.
Mm.
And that's a great big thing. Like your business entity has to be approved, the warehouse has to be checked, it has to be, very thorough in this because, it's all consumer protection in the end.
I really wonder if, in some ways, Amazon USA isn't kind of going that way. They've been limiting so much wholesale without letters of authorization and stuff like that. So, I mean, you're seeing it getting closer to that in the US as well.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I think Amazon for the longest time has gotten away with or got away with uh the how not visible it is, like
Mm,
to its inner workings. There was a whole thing like 5 years ago where it was like, how are we doing our taxes? And then Amazon went, I'll handle it. It's fine.
mm.
But there was a great thing where it was like, oh man, these couple of states, like, what do we do? Because they're not filing them. Like it was silly. Amazon has just advanced faster than regulations ever could. So I wouldn't be surprised if yeah, like over time that does start,
Yeah,
being brought
yeah.
more in line.
What do you think is probably the most underused marketing tactic in Mexico that you see as something most people don't think about doing, but you have found to really help with the product?
This I'll answer for an American audience, because in Mexico we do know this, but American audiences or like my clients generally go, I don't really want to do UGC, but UGC is just absolutely massive in Mexico. So we launched a program where it's like, listen, we have to be off platform to drive people to the platform and to be able to express things because we're at different stages in the lifetime of e-commerce, right? And right
Mm.
now, we still need a lot of social proof of people going, listen, it's going to get to your house. Listen, if it doesn't get to your house, you get refunded. Like, don't stress about it. So yeah, it's mostly UGC off-platform traffic in general. Like, listen, pay your influencers, get people to the listing. Conversion rates are high if your prices are well thought out. So just get people to click is I think what
So, what advice would you give to somebody who was just aspiring to launch their own e-commerce business in Mexico to get started? What advice would you give them?
understand the marketplace, understand your partners. I think a lot of the cultural shock that I felt, because I
Yeah,
am Mexican, by the way, but
yeah.
I lived abroad a lot of my life, and a lot of the culture shock that I ran into being here and being like, oh, like the way we talk to our partners is different. The way we talk to our vendors, the way we talk to basically anyone is different. The expectations are different. The communication style is different. There's a lot of social navigating, a lot of like we're less to the point, right? So socially or like in there's that. On the other hand, just make sure that you are on top of marketplaces. Mercado Libre can be an absolute nightmare. They straight up can be an absolute nightmare. In the way they handle their penalties, they seem nicer than Amazon. They're not nicer than Amazon. So just being on top of them is really important. And thirdly, like you need to understand your audience. You absolutely need to understand your audience. There's a lot of products that take off in the US that just don't take off in Mexico. And vice versa, right? Like it's gonna happen. So if you're coming from abroad and you want to launch it in Mexico, talk to experts that are gonna like help you figure out like, hey, is this gonna probably work or not? No one's gonna give you a sure shot, but does this kind of feel like we're going along the right way? And I think that's the way to think about it.
Yeah, so now do you use typically the same tools that we would use in the US to find good product? You'd still use things like Jungle Scout and Keepa and that type of stuff?
Yeah, and yes and no. Yes for Amazon, no because it doesn't cover 60% of the market, which is everything else in e-commerce. So we can use it as a base, especially because some products will take off on Amazon and not somewhere else. So we go, hey, this could work on Amazon, cool, let's do it. But you got to have a whole variety of listing of tools. You need for Mercado Libre we have a couple, for Walmart we have a couple, for like we had to build some in house just because this is it like it's ridiculous how little visibility we may have here. So it's still a lot of playing it by ear, playing it by feel, going like I think this might work better. A lot of your like I'm a big fan of Helium 10 and Zonguru, and a lot of the keyword analysis sometimes just doesn't hit as well. So it's just it's
So
just
is it your recommendation if somebody wants to get into the market that they should really look for an agency then that kind of specializes and has good knowledge of the culture within Mexico?
I think work with someone that's going to take it off your plate. And this sounds like look, it's what we do, right? So what we do
Yeah.
is we figured out the easiest thing is to just listen. We'll sell it for you. We basically sell as a service, and we're like, we'll pay you the profit once it sells, and we'll deal with all the headaches. We have the regulatory know how. We have the importing. We have the partners. We have the 3PL, the everything. But ultimately, it's an opportunity cost thing. Uh we have about 10-15%, probably like 10% of the market that the US does when it comes to talking about like what you can expect to sell here. Putting a lot of time into it might not be worth it for you. Like if you're smaller, sure, because you can dominate. But if you're established, most of our clients are bigger. Putting the time into Mexico wouldn't make sense. So it's like, listen, just work with someone that does, right? So that's what we're doing. And yeah, it's working.
Well, give us a little bit of a history on GoAvance. How long have you been around and what exactly, how did you come to do what you're doing? Tell us a little bit more about yourself.
I am an engineer by schooling, mechanical engineer. I come out of school in the UK and I go, well, I don't want to be here and I don't want to do this, so I fly to Mexico. And then I go, all right, let's try to find a job, an engineering job. And it was just so badly paid, it wasn't going to work. And then I went, wait, but I speak perfect English. Like I can do, So I changed my CV to English and I started just sending it, like not like indiscriminately, bam, 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 wherever I could get it. And I get interviewed by an Amazon agency, and I go, and they're like, "Do you know Amazon?" I go, "No." And they go, "Do you know any marketing?" I go, "No." They go, "Do you know Excel?" And I go, "Yeah, I'm really good at it." And then chatting. Obviously, we talked about processes and we talked about critical thinking. All these things. They're like, "Yeah, you can figure it out." So they brought me on board, and I worked there for 5, 6 years. Uh, and it came to a point where I was like, "All right, it's time to do a different thing." I was going to do an agency in Mexico, and it just wasn't. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. I think it would have made more sense if I had known what I know now, right, about the market and so on. So at the same time, I had a lot of interest in people going, "Can we get into Mexico?" And I was going, maybe." And then I went, "No, you can't." So I was like, "Wait, but I can figure out how to." And this is a big enough barrier to entry that it means opportunity. So the same company just repurposed to be now an importer in logistics, and the absolute hubris, by the way, to go, yeah, I can figure out logistics. Why not? I can
Yeah.
figure out importing. Why not? So it was a nightmare at the beginning because something like I mentioned, cultural shocks in Mexico earlier. Every single lawyer gave me a different answer. Every single importing partner gave me a different answer because everyone's just trying to sell their service, right? Landed on someone that I really liked. Uh, we built a really good partnership, and yeah, and then we started scaling. We started just going, all right, we have a system that works from receiving product in Texas to getting to Mexico City, being on every e-commerce platform, and marketing the crap out of it, and hopefully, and having a good launch process. And then things just fell into place because then it was like, all right, now I have full trust in my product. Let me reach out to people that I think would do well. So that's what we started doing, and so far so good.
Well, good. Now give us your website address for any of our listeners that might want to just come and check you out and find out a little bit more about getting into the Mexican market.
Totally. So we're goavance.com, GoAvance.com.
Okay.
Um, And yeah, if you go contact us, that's me. I'm still taking all of the like conversations at the beginning to be like, hey, will this work? Won't this work? Let me figure out. I'll be straight up on the call and be like, hey, man, like this is probably not going to work, and that's fine. But if it will work, I'm like, yeah, sure, come on in. Like we'll make it happen. Um, and if you want to find out like whether you can even sell your product in Mexico or whatever, like
Yeah.
I'm your guy. Like honestly,
All right. All
yeah.
right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us today for Ecom Insiders, sponsored by SPC Tech. Our guest speaker again today, Ramiro Velasco from GoAvance. If you are interested in getting into the Mexican market, learning a little bit more about what type of product sells there, this is the place you go. You have a conversation with Romero. He will set you up. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave them in the comment fields below. And then if you enjoyed today's session, just please subscribe to get future editions of Ecom Insiders. Again, Romero, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me
No, Debbie,
today.
thank you. Thank you for having me. It was really nice.
All right. You have a great day.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.